Welcome to Mastering Modern Midlife. I'm Catherine Grace O'Connell, and this show is powered by the Forever Fierce Revolution. Speaking of Forever Fierce, I am delighted to introduce my guest today. Kirshen Katz is a celebrity yoga teacher here in LA. And I am so excited to welcome a Forever Fierce sister and another woman who's getting close to the Countdown to 60 Club. Yes. 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 Right? Exactly. It's a good thing. It's hey, I made it to 58. I'm grateful. And we certainly did not think women getting close to 16 look like this.
Oh,
back in the day.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to the show, Kirshen. I am so happy to have you and to finally meet you in person through our mutual friend, Miss Janet Gunn and Miss Melissa Myers.
We love Janet and Melissa.
We do love Janet and Melissa.
And it's lovely meeting you.
Thank you.
Hearing all about you and this amazing business you have created.
It's been a wild ride, hasn't it? Yeah. And you have, speaking of wild rides, I think that is the most empowering thing about midlife. You know, here you are, this amazingly beautiful, fit, lovely woman. But there is a wild ride. There's a story that got you here today. And of course, we want to talk about celebrity yoga instructor and all these wonderful things. But I really want to start back. You started in this world with some real challenges and adversity that certainly took your life in a vastly different direction. So please tell us about that.
This episode of Mastering Modern Midlife is brought to you by Easy Spirit. Now, more than ever, we know life is about more than just shoes. Being comfortable in your own skin and making life easier is what matters most.
So I am from New York, from upstate New York, and I grew up in a very low-income family with a father who was a verbally and physically abusive person. And I call him the father and not my father because at some point I realized he was not worthy of that title. That title is, represents all the fathers of my friends' parents that were loving and, encouraged their children. And we just didn't have that. We had someone who was rageful and abusive. And so we were terrified. We lived at what I call a war zone. Our house was a war zone, and the father was a monster. And so we had to learn to navigate through that. And it was very hard because you're a child and, you just want a dad. And my mother was born to a family of Portuguese, low-income family, and she never had a voice. And so she was never really able to protect us. So I always look at my mother as part of, being in the trenches with us, trying to protect us, but also probably feeling terrible that she couldn't. And so just things were, really rough and violent, and our self-esteem was zero.
I do understand that. I think a lot of women in our audience can understand that.
Yeah.
I remember you sharing a story when you were 14. There was a very defining moment where you started to find your voice or maybe start tapping into some of that anger, and you made a decision really to find a way to face him and find a way to get out of there.
Right. So he had introduced us to running. So back in the 70s, running was a huge sport across the country. And there was a running club in Syracuse, and he brought us there because he wanted an athlete. He really wanted sons. And he lived vicariously through us. And we were all ended up being really good runners. And so he pushed us into that. And eventually I ended up loving it. It became a sacred thing for me to do. And we were all very good at it. In fact, we became one of the top running families in the country. And we were part of the top running clubs in the country. And so competing, and if we'd win, we would be shrouded with candy bars, and if we lost, we would be hit in the head with a closed fist. So a lot of violence and just terror, basically.
Yes.
And so
a lot of incentive then to, like you said, win, to run and use this as an escape.
Yes, and so pressure to win.
Exactly.
And so that went on for years. I always say that so when I was 14, I had come home from a race that I had lost, and he went after me and had me in a corner, and I escaped him. I ran up the stairs. And then I stopped in the middle of those stairs, and I turned around. He was chasing me, and I turned around and I came back to the third step, which was even with his face. And I said, "How can you?" He would tell me that I'm effing nothing. So I don't want to swear, but you're effing nothing. You're nothing. You're worthless. And so that's what you hear. But there was something always in me, and I call it intuition. And it's not really silent. It's usually just screaming at you that said, "You are not that. You are more than that." And I faced him. I looked at him and I said, "How can you call me? How can you tell me I'm effing nothing? I'm your child." And in that moment, just looking at him, he lost all his power over me. And I was not fearful of him anymore. He was a coward, and I realized that. And so, I still had to navigate those next few years while I was living in this household. But I was able to do that, and just know that at some point through my running career, I ended up getting a full track scholarship to the University of Houston, actually to many universities. I was a highly recruited runner. And so I look at that and go, the one thing he introduced me to, the one thing he gave me, gift he gave me, the introduction to running, was actually the one thing that got me away from him. And so after years of running and suffering, I got on a plane in 1979 and left for college. And that was the very last time I ever saw him.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. That's a long time ago.
And leaving a parent who abuses you, it's very hard for people to do. It's very hard because there's such a pull.
Stockholm syndrome. I mean, they have that power and that control over you for a very long time, if not forever.
And so I was able to leave, and I never looked back. And most importantly, I forgave him, and I forgave myself for hating him because I had such hate in me. And so that freed me and just allowed me to have a lot of love and live with love. It doesn't mean it was an easy ride after
It's
that.
a process, and forgiveness is not something all of a sudden we flip a switch and we've forgiven. It's a process. It's
and there
unhooking.
were 3 daughters, and so the other 2 sisters, they didn't have that intuition. They didn't listen to it, and sadly, they turned to heroin. And one sister was a heroin addict for many years and a prostitute at 12 years old.
Oh my God, devastating.
So it was a devastating journey for her. And the other sisters come around, and now we are close. But it's the trauma. It's the trauma of a parent. What a parent can,
There's a lot of post-traumatic stress woven in the fiber of your lives and your lives together. So let's talk about those tapes. You had some tapes playing that started at a very early age with this abuse. Do they still play today? Are there still things that come up? Like, what has that process been for you to unwind the abuse and unwind those internal stories that clearly were beaten into you, like you said, literally as a child?
So what happened was then I go to University of Houston, and I'm this big runner and a nationally ranked runner, and run. And that, I know I suffer from a bit of compulsion. And so that translated into, we talked about it, you're a runner and ran lots of miles. We would be running 90-mile weeks. 90-mile weeks in a six-day week or a 5-day week, we compete for a day. That's about 18 miles a day you'd be running. That's too much on your body. Also, I ended up getting into bulimia. So it wasn't a thing back then. No one knew what that word was. But it was a compulsion that I had to purge the unhappiness from me. It's like you're eating because there's such anxiety. And although I don't suffer from depression, I do suffer from anxiety. And the 90 miles a week wasn't cutting it. All the dopamine and the serotonin that I was producing was still not calming me down. And so I would end up, I ended up having bulimia, and I would end up throwing up 5-6 times a day and running 90 miles a week. And it was just, it was very traumatic. And so what happened to me one day, and I would tell my mother, I told my mother this. My mother was my rock. She eventually left her husband, the father, and she was off on her own. And we were always very, very close. Greatest love of my life was my mother.
And I know you lost her, and we'll get into that because that was a defining moment as well.
Yes. And I remember that, so I was over a toilet bowl and I was throwing up and I heard a voice, which was my voice, that said, "Stop harming yourself." It said, "Stop harming yourself." And I was just like, where is that voice coming from? And so I called my mother up and she said, "Go to a therapist." And I went to a therapist and we determined it wasn't body-based. It wasn't a body image type of bulimia.
Like a dysmorphia.
Yes.
It was more internal.
It was anxiety from trauma, things that have happened, specific events that happened to me with this father. And once we revealed those events, the desire to do that released from me.
You healed the root.
Yes. And I had no interest in doing that again. So that self-harm and then also with that came, the release of any sort of bad thoughts. And really, when I forgave him, I stopped having bad thoughts. I did. I bought into it, you're worthless, you're this. But there's a part of me, I guess the self-esteem that I had was that that's not your narrative. And just also that distance. So it's very hard to grow and free yourself and have the moment, those contemplative moments when you are with your captor. Yes. A captor, your father's your captor. And so when I was off on my own, now being an independent person, making decisions, having all this self-esteem through my running and my ability, and tapping into, making my own decisions, trying to make every decision a good decision, that's when I just was released from all of that dogma, all that destructive dogma. And really, I never since then have had bad thoughts about myself. I've always just been neutral. And if there are things that come up where I'm not successful at something, I just face it and I just move forward. I don't let it define me. I do not let negative, we have 60,000 thoughts a day and the majority of them are dark. It's like, I just don't want to live in that dark space.
So we want to dive into this whole Hawaii journey. And I got to tell you, I had no idea people could live in the 4 seasons. So,
well, they can.
You did, exactly.
And it was an incredible year. Well, it was 3 years, but 6 months, and then one final year living there. I considered us the poor white trash of the 4 seasons. So yeah, you're around vast wealth, and it is interesting. And we were full-time homeowners there, so I was living there. I was teaching yoga. And I was training. My marriage at that time was falling apart. And really, I was abandoned at the 4 seasons. So not only living there, but abandoned. So we moved there, and then he stayed back in Los Angeles.
And how did you find this out?
Well, he was just never there. So, he dropped me off. We moved in, and then he left for 30 days. Now, I had friends there, and so I had this nice little social life. But it was a bizarre situation, and he would come back and just start yelling and screaming. And, I did not feel safe. I was beginning to feel like this is not a safe place for me because all that rage that he started taking out on other people now was being turned on to me. And so I fled. I fled the 4 seasons.
You fled the 4 seasons, and then you came to LA, and he was here too.
No. I fled the 4 seasons. I had my marriage was over. I had signed a prenup which I don't recommend. And I left my marriage with a very small amount of money, a broken heart, and came back to Los Angeles and had to hustle. And
how old were you then?
I was 42 at the time.
42.
So had to reinvent myself. Okay, so I'm living in this one elevated place, and now I'm in Los Angeles, living in a one-bedroom apartment off of Wilshire and 19th Street in Santa Monica. And
starting over.
Starting over. And really just a lot of sadness. And I would wake up shaking, and what am I going to do? And, I just had this word abundance. So I live a lot of by mantras. Being a yogi, mantras come into play with yoga. And so that mantra for me was abundance. And I wanted to put it out, just not for me, but for everyone around me. So abundance for me and abundance for everyone I come in contact with. And I just had this vision of just moving forward every day moving forward. And again, no self-harm. So I was in the Palisades having my hair done, and I was talking to my friend, and she was a hairdresser, and a woman was sitting there, and we were talking about what had happened. She had known me for years, and that I was a yoga teacher. And this woman came up to me. She handed me her card, and she was the wife of a Hollywood producer. And she said, "Come and teach me yoga." And
wow.
I was like, okay.
Abundance came calling right away.
Abundance came calling. And so I started working with her privately. And she introduced me to 3 women.
A whole new world opened up.
A whole new world. And these 3 women, yoga angels, I call them, they introduced me to, they were all part of Hollywood. They introduced me to many of my clients. And so I started doing private yoga, now full-time as my career, and just really developed that business. And one of the women introduced me to Julie Roberts. And so I was with Julie Roberts for 7 years, and love her.
I love her too.
Yes.
We'll tweet her.
Tweet her.
We will tweet her.
And anyway, and so I was very fortunate enough to travel the world with her. And we traveled. She called me up one day and she's like, "I'm doing Eat, Pray, Love." And I said, "I'm in." And so we traveled for a month to Rome and then on to India. And being a yoga teacher, I had not been to India. So I'm grateful that through Julia Roberts, I was able to, travel to the birth of yoga. And then we did a month in Bali. So I was gone for 3.5 months, and it was just a gorgeous trip, a very interesting, 3 different countries, 3 different cultures. And so that was a magnificent journey.
You somehow jumped to the 1%. I like the 1%. I'm not 1%. I've never been to India either, but I doubt that I'm going to go in that.
I'm 1% adjacent. I vicariously live through But you know what?
I'm so grateful. That abundance
and I'll
works.
tell you what it is too. I don't covet that. I'm not jealous of them. I'm so grateful to be surrounded by people that have all of this access, and I get wonderful things that get, introduced to wonderful things that happen to me. And I'm never jealous of anybody. Jealousy is such a bad emotion to
Tends to repel abundance pretty well.
It does. And I'm just grateful that I get these people that are just so interesting and fun and hardworking. And I got that pretty woman through two marathons, 2 half marathons. So she wanted to run. And so I run with some of my clients as well. And we did 2 half marathons in Oxnard and got her to the finish line, and just a beautiful experience.
What was your favorite experience on the Eat, Pray, Love tour? What was your most memorable or favorite?
I will tell you this. This experience, I had a driver when I was in India. In India, everyone says, they're poor people, but they're so happy. And I don't know how happy you can be when you're suffering the way these people are suffering. But it was a beautiful country. And I had a driver, and I wanted to go shopping for fabrics. And so we went to this beautiful fabric store, this lovely fabric store. I wanted to get gifts for all my clients. I had to leave my clients. And so I said, I hope they're going to be there for me when I come back. So I'm going to get gifts in every country. So we'll have a little, presentation for them. So I walk into this fabric store. It's beautiful. And I said, can you come in and help me? And he's like, no, I can't go in there because it's a caste system and he's not allowed. He feels he's not allowed to go into this exquisite fabric.
And the
store.
caste system is a tiered system depending on your wealth, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I said, come with me. So I bring him into the store and I walk in and everyone's like, and I had him help me. I asked if he would help me. And he helped me pick out fabrics and gifts for people and my friends and my clients. And then, and I know, he didn't do this for me. I don't care about me. It's that he never had that experience. Mm-hmm. And it was so wonderful that he could have that experience. And I said, pick out some things for your wife. And so he got to make choices. Those, the people in those situations often don't get to have those choices. You don't get to choose. You just have to take what you can get. And so he got to pick out these beautiful fabrics. And so we paid for them and then we went on our merry way. And it was just a lovely experience to share with somebody who was just wonderful.
Such a ripple effect of the abundance. So as you were so grateful for the abundance you were receiving, you are now affecting others and sharing that abundance. It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's how
we're all the same.
It works. Exactly. So this marriage ended. Now you're reinventing yourself. Now you're a celebrity yoga instructor, but there's still a lot of stuff that needed to be processed and healed from that marriage. So, and the difficult times weren't over because we're going to go on to your mother, but so how did you unwind and heal from this marriage, this basically man who abandoned you, really dealing with all the rage and a lot of your childhood coming back through again, and then go on to this new life, the second act as a celebrity yoga instructor and start healing, and then you went through then we'll go to your mother.
So lots of running, lots of yoga, lots of contemplation. So, I spend a lot of time alone. I'm very social when I'm with my clients. It's like having play dates. So it's a wonderful thing. But when I'm alone, it's really, again, about forgiveness. And I looked at my ex-husband's life and his journey. And I also, I realized that just emotionally, he was never going to,
it wasn't about you.
No, it wasn't about me. He just was somebody who we were not.
He was damaged.
Yes, damaged and not looking for any, help, not looking to help himself. And so in that case, you just have to move on. I decided
it was actually a gift that he left you so that you could be free and move on.
It was. He did leave me. I physically left because I felt I was in danger, but he actually abandoned me. So yes, he did leave me. And then it was about again, moving forward, no self-harm, getting busy and just feeling really positive about, being present in this moment, having the courage to leave something that was so dysfunctional, and also going, I don't want to be with anybody that I have to manage their moods. Like that was a pact I made to myself.
And walking on eggshells like you did as a child, it sounds like.
And also knowing that I can be alone. Like I could be alone. And I always had this thing where I have to have a man.
Rescue
rescue me. And just like done with that. I don't need to be rescued. I have this abundant life. I'm tapping into my voice. I'm feeling very confident with these clients and just how people are referring me. And just really, staying present and not worrying, just getting out of that worrying, that what's going to happen to me.
The anxiety, like you said, all of the underlying.
Yeah.
So what does forgiveness mean to you? And what is a tool or technique you could share with our audience to help them? Maybe they're going through something difficult. Maybe they're holding on to some old trauma, some old hurt that could help them release and move forward.
Well, for me, just hope, staying in the moment, just not taking any of that energy in, not taking in other people's negative energy, being empathetic, like really tap into people's, your own empathy towards other people.
Like you did with your ex-husband.
Yes. And just also detaching yourself. I call it the art of detachment. It's where we take a lot of other people's stress on, or we want to help everybody, but then we take that on, and that can be very destructive for us. So sort of a detachment, loving kindness,
healthy
empathy,
boundaries.
Yes, and really creating, great boundaries.
Why Easy Spirit and Mastering Modern Midlife? Because we both believe in age positivity. Midlife is a time for women to design their life on their terms, and Easy Spirit is on a mission. As makers of shoes and experiences that are all about making life easy for all women, especially for you, the modern midlife woman. I move for women at midlife and beyond to help you ignite your ultimate potential and purpose. Easy Spirit wants to know, what do you move for?
Healthy boundaries. It sounds like an evolution of self-awareness, really.
Right.
So you know yourself now, and all right, so now let's go into, you had another clearly life-defining moment that led to another reinvention of yourself and understanding trauma and what caused this illness. So let's talk about your mom, the loss of your mom, and you were then diagnosed with a pretty serious illness.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, now we're going to, I had met David. David is now my husband.
You've been together a long time.
We've been together 14 years, and I am a
newlywed. That is amazing.
Anyway, so I met him in 2005, 2 years after my divorce. I spent 2 years alone, and met this man in a grocery store, and that's a fun story. But anyway, fast forwarding to 2015, my mother, my best friend, she called me one morning, healthy little 80-year-old woman who loves golf and just a delightful woman, always there for me every day. I leave Los Angeles. I live in Calabasas. In the 45 minutes I would drive home in my car. I'd call her, and she would drive me all the way into my garage, and we would talk for 45 minutes, just that close, just a deep,
it's amazing,
loving, like what a mother should be, Anyway.
And she's in Brooklyn, is that right?
No, she was in Boston.
Boston, okay,
yes.
Boston.
And she called me one morning, and she hadn't been feeling well, and she called me and screamed over the phone that she had ovarian cancer, and stage 3. So we were hoping for 3 to 5 years is what we were told. I left my life. My sister left her life. We went back to Gloucester, Massachusetts, and she had surgery a week later. And not to get too dark, but the surgery was a 5-hour scheduled surgery. After an hour and a half, she was out of surgery. And my sister said, "Wow, this is great news." And I said, "This is not great news." And we went in, and she was told she had 1 month to live.
So it wasn't stage 3. It sounds like it
stage
was
9,
yeah, 4
zillion.
plus. Yes.
And the cancer was spreading all throughout her body. And she immediately made a decision to go into hospice. And my sister and I stayed with her. David showed up, and she lived another month. So it was
so fast.
It was so fast. It was no time to do anything. I don't have much experience with death. My grandparents were all 96 and 97 and died, just in their sleep, the way we all hope we would pass. And this woman, did not get that.
Went from you thinking she was
golfing
to
18
boom,
holes a day.
exactly,
yes,
boom, gone.
To ovarian cancer, death sentence. And so it was another in the middle of a trauma. And no sleep, no eat, living off of M&Ms and Flapper's chocolate cake,
yes.
Sugar, my go-to addiction.
Stress, like you said.
Stress, dealing with things. She made an unusual choice she was so happy. She had been suffering 3 years before because her partner died. And so she had become what this beautiful mother was not very kind. She lost her partner and she morphed into a very angry person. So that was very challenging. And so the moment she knew she was going to leave this planet, she became this lovely mother that she had always been, because those 3 years were brutal. And she became this lovely mother and was super present and super kind and was so happy that Erica and I were going to be with her. And we had the most beautiful death, sorrowful, delightful death. But it was just, I'm so grateful I did that. I'm so grateful I was there with her. I'm so grateful David came. And it was really interesting. She had made a choice really to shut everybody out, her friends. And so,
and even your sister, you had us.
There's a third sister, and she was, separated from this family, and she was told not to come, and she would be escorted off the property if she did. And we had to field phone calls from friends that wanted to say goodbye to my mother, but my mother made this strange, decision not to really say goodbye to anybody. And so, everyone thought we were keeping them from her. And so that was, so we were getting, again, and I was just running miles and miles, getting 3 hours of sleep, and I ended up getting very sick. And so we 2 months later, we cremated her, and then I returned to Los Angeles. But I am so grateful and so proud to have had that, to be with your mother when she passes. And so grateful I have a mother. I have friends that don't have that relationship, that have awkward or challenging or awful relationships with their mother. And, that still impact them daily, never move beyond the, carnage. I call it carnage of our parents. And it is carnage. They hold so much power over us. And so, unfortunately, the wrong parent left the planet, but I'm so grateful to have had that.
And that unleashed a lot of, basically, it was another trauma.
Right.
That then, after that, you were diagnosed with a...
It's like life is great, and then trauma.
Yes.
And just when you think...
what trauma does is
just when you
unbelievable.
think. And the other thing is, I realized never say never, or always. Like when I was married and I had this life and money and a Porsche and a beautiful life. So I just thought that's how it's going to be the rest of my life. It was delusional to think that way, because at any moment, everything can be taken from you. And you have to have that courage to face all of that. So I don't ever say never. I never say never. Well, I just said never, but
the truth is that the only thing is we're not really in control of this experience here on Earth, as it is. Like you said, your life can change. Your mother's life was gone really in an instant, in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So anything, including our lives, can be taken from us. So that clearly triggered a lot of things in your physical, body. Stress, we know, can manifest every which way.
I ended up getting very sick, and a sickness that I did not identify or recognize. And it came in very fast and very hard. And for the next 18 months, I had multiple rounds of antibiotics. I had heart doctors. I had pulmonary doctors. I had sinus doctors. No one could figure out what was wrong with me.
These mysterious illnesses. What did you call it? Your nebulous illness.
Nebulous illness.
I
wrote about it. Right. My nebulous illness. And CAT scans, X-rays, MRIs. It manifested in my sinus. And my wheezing, I had the wheeze of the rattles of someone who's not going to live long. I couldn't walk. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't taste or smell. I could barely see. And throughout all of this, I'm still teaching yoga to all my clients. And
running like crazy.
And running. I did an half Ironman with a client. I did the LA Marathon. And I just hid this from everybody because I didn't know what it was. And I'm a working woman. I need to work for a living. And so I did not know what to do. I was at a point where I was so sick. It was in every muscle, joint, tendon. I couldn't think properly. I couldn't remember. I really succumb to the fact that I am going to be, not on this
It's
planet
completely
long.
debilitating,
Yes.
and you spiraled into a space of
this.
really
Yes.
darkness and despair and
Yes.
suicidal thoughts, which,
Yes.
you know, I've shared many times with Lyme, because this is not, doesn't mean that you are suicidal per se. It means the suffering, like, I'm ready to go.
Yes.
But you were like, by the same token, you're like, I love life, but I want to live it with a quality. You had no quality of life.
Right. I love life so much, and I can take suffering. I don't want any suffering, but I have a high pain threshold, years of running for you, and I've suffered, and I know suffering, and I can handle suffering.
There's a brink point.
Yes, this was suffering that I was a miserable person, and I'm not used to being a miserable person. I wasn't myself, and when you're not yourself, you know, you just don't want to be here anymore. And that's where I was. And I was just thinking about, I'm going to throw myself in front of a truck, or how, you know, you start thinking about how you're going to do this. And that alone makes you even more sad. And so my boyfriend at the time, David, my husband, you know.
It sounds like a patient soul through all of this. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Anyway, and so he finally said, you need to go see a therapist. And because he was worried for me. And so I went to go see a therapist. And this was a woman I had seen before in the past. I'm not in therapy regularly, but I go in when I need a problem solved, Dr. Laurel in Westwood. And I called her up and I said, I need to come in. So I went to go see her. And this is so strange. I walk she's on the 11th floor. I walk into the elevator. And I don't really want to go, but I feel I have to go. And no one's in the elevator but this little woman who's about 80 years old with white hair and looks like my mother's doppelganger. And she comes in and she smiles at me with her little twinkling eyes. And I just wanted to flee because I just started crying. I was so emotional. And I wanted to flee the elevator, and instead I just stayed in the elevator, and I thought of her as my Sherpa guiding me to, you know, this help that I'm asking for. So I go in to see Dr. Laurel, and we're talking, and she's like, knows nothing of this because I hadn't seen her in 2 years. She goes, what are your symptoms? And I said, you know, all the numerous symptoms I have. And she goes, I think you have she goes, have you ever been exposed to a water-damaged building? And I said, no. And then I thought about it. 6 months ago, I was visiting my mother at Christmas. I went into her bedroom, and the whole ceiling, 1/4 of the ceiling was domed. And I looked at that, and I said, you need to get that fixed. What is that? It was a 120-year-old house that had sprung a leak, and she did not have it removed properly. And so I told Laurel this, and Laurel said, I think you have biotoxin illness. I have no idea what that is. And she goes, it's from mold. The mold was not removed from your mother's house. It was in her bedroom. You spent 2 months in her bedroom. That's considered an extended exposure. You know about this. And spores come out of mold. If you don't clean mold within 48 hours, they produce spores. Through spores come mycotoxins. Mycotoxins enter your body. And if you're one of 4 people in the world that has the bad gene, the HLA-DR gene, which I do, I've been tested for it, you do not have the ability to clear those mycotoxins out of your body. Yes. And they just stay running through your body. And
that manifested actually in a very, it's obviously one of the parts of Lyme disease, biotoxin illness, which is the Lyme is covered by this biofilm, and which is what you were experiencing. So many of the symptoms you described were very similar because people asked you if you need to be tested for Lyme. So this basically then, from there, I mean, you were really, really ill. So let's dive into this whole, oh my goodness, the illness and what your symptoms were. And I mean, it was trauma, boom. You had all these things going on in your body, your mom, mold. What was it like for you?
It was not a good time. It was not a good time. It was devastation of your body. Also for me, I'm an athlete, and I rely on my body not only for my salvation, my mental health, but for my clients. And you feel and see your body failing you. And especially this nebulous illness, you don't know what it is. So.
And a lot of times, like you said, when we were just taking a little break, they're sending you to psychiatrists, which only makes you think then, okay, there's something wrong with me and they're crazy. That's what they're leading you to believe. But there really is something physical, and just the majority of doctors don't have a clue when it comes to things like biotoxin illness or mold, spores, and all of those things.
Yes. And they don't even believe in that. I mean, they just don't even believe it's a real thing. So I'm grateful that she diagnosed me. So vials of blood, you go through all of that. You're sick. She said, had I not been an athlete, someone with my numbers as high as they were would have been wheelchair bound or in a hospital. But because I'm an athlete and I ran through this, that really helped me, keep from, being in a wheelchair. So you go on a protocol, and so the protocol is a binder. There's a beg spray in your sinus. You have things called marcons in your sinus, which are
bacteria.
Bacteria. It's basically staph in your sinus. And they tested me, and I was full of staph. So a neuroquanta brain MRI, 6 of my 8 quadrants were fully inflamed, and my numbers came back, horrible. And so I was put on this protocol that I stuck with, and was getting a little bit better, but not a lot better. And then we had our house tested. My doctor, Laurel, said, get your own home tested. So I had originally gotten sick at my mother's home, and now I tested my own home. And in my kitchen, underneath the kitchen, we had someone come in, and he found mold under our kitchen. It was called Aspergillus versicolor. There's 28 water damage building molds. And anyway, long story short, I had to have that remediated. I had to have my whole house remediated. And then I had to have a major sinus surgery, which is a 3-hour sinus surgery with a doctor who understood biotoxin illness. Homage to him, Dr. Nathan. Anyway, and it was the worst surgery he had ever performed. And immediately I started feeling better. So after 18 months of not being diagnosed, and then another year after diagnosis, and spending $40,000.
I can relate to that.
$40,000 on trying to figure out what this illness was. And that is with insurance.
It's easy to go through when it comes to, because a lot of it is integrative. A lot of things are not covered by insurance. And like you said, there's a whole process just figuring it out. So you went through a period where, they're sending you to psychiatrists and they're thinking you're crazy. But there was a part of you that knew, and a big part of you. You said you were literally felt like you were dying on the inside, but because you looked fine, there was this disconnect and you weren't believed. What was that like for you?
That was really tricky because, again, I was masking this for people that I didn't want anyone to know I was sick. I had to hide all of that. I didn't feel I was deceiving anybody, and I knew nobody could catch this because David hadn't. I knew whatever I had was not
it was more
contagious. It was an internal thing. It was just a really scary time because you couldn't really see it. But I thought, even though they recommended psychiatrists, I knew I was sick. I know that I am not a hypochondriac. I want to live well and healthy and have a beautiful life. And so I never doubted for 1 second that this was manifested mentally. I thought in the beginning it was just stress from my mother, and it was. My immune system plummeted. I was surrounded by mold, and I just do not have that gene, so it really came down to that. And once I knew that it was nothing that I could control, it was a relief to find out. And it's just a relief to know that you have a name for something. I don't know if I was going to get better. She gave me hope that I was going to get better. I had to strictly follow this protocol. But biotoxin illness, at least I knew that that's what it was. So that just relieved, and I immediately stopped feeling suicidal. I immediately felt hopeful, and hope can be tricky. Hope can be tricky.
Hope is tricky, and I remember getting diagnosed with Lyme after, over a decade searching, and I sobbed, and it it was sobbing, oh my God, somebody believes me. I'm not crazy. It was such an incredible sense of relief.
Yeah.
So what did this illness teach you about you? What is the greatest lesson you learned out of it?
To be kind to your body, to be kind, to forgive yourself, forgive your body for failing you. Really forgive your body for failing. I was so angry that my body failed me. And, it didn't fail me actually. And to just keep searching, like I didn't give up. I understand I've had a lot of suicide in my life. Many of my friends' parents, my friends' children, I'm shrouded in suicide. And I understand suicide. And that was not something that I really wanted to do. So I am just grateful that I hung in there, and do as much seeking as you can. If this doctor tells you you're crazy, don't see that doctor anymore. If you know in your
there's a gut
biome, in your biome that there is, that what your truth is, then just keep pursuing that and don't give up. And so I feel very grateful for having not done that, because I'm here with you today.
Here you are, exactly, and clearly the picture of health and wellness. So now you have, many celebrity clients that you work with. I don't know if you want to name any now, but I think it's amazing what we have women out there all over the world right now who are watching you and looking to you for maybe some suggestions on how to live a healthier life. Maybe they're going through a process of reinvention. Maybe they need to lose some weight. Maybe they've got something off in their body. Maybe they've got some trauma to heal. What are maybe 3 steps, things they could do in their life right now to, make a difference, make them feel better, help them propel forward?
Well, I think one of the most important things is just recognizing dark thoughts, recognizing dark thoughts and labeling them dark thoughts when you have them. I'm always around. I'm around in gyms, at my gym, and around people, and I get a lot of people, women, that come up to me and go, oh, I wish I had your body. Oh, I wish I looked like you. Oh, I wish. And that pains me. It's like, you're beautiful. You have your gifts. Everybody has their gifts. And not everybody can look like me, like I can't look like everybody else. And so stop comparing yourself to people and just stop those dark thoughts. And I know that people have them. You have to just recognize them, label them, and then release them. And so meditation is wonderful for that. And actually have a sense of humor about them. We all have them, well, I try not to, but I've controlled them over the years. But yeah, just not being so destructive about our looks, not attaching ourselves to something that is so so that changes so much. Like not basing your self-esteem on something that is just always changing.
So becoming very aware when we have a negative thought, a dark thought, like you said, perhaps it's a jealousy because we're triggered by someone's beauty and then we make ourselves less than. Number one, realize it's just a thought. Right. Like you said, you can label it or not label it, but just become aware that that is just a thought and that is not necessarily who you are. And maybe turn that thought into something positive. What I learned in my master's in spiritual psychology was about positive projections. Actually, when we see something beautiful in somebody else, our culture has taught us to put ourselves down instead of recognizing that we can't see beauty in them if it's not in us.
Excellent.
Which I think is a really beautiful way to reframe that in that moment.
Yes. And again, jealousy, just, never being jealous of anybody. It's super destructive. Just finding the beauty in everything, starting with yourself. Like, what is, we all have gifts. We all have special gifts. I mean, I could sit here and tell you the things that I'm, aren't, thrilled about myself. I've lost a third of my hair, blah, 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 but I don't care about those things. I am trying to live a life beyond the visual. I'm trying to live a life of tapping into my kindness. That is the most important thing. And, setting good boundaries for myself and just being an empathetic person and being loving, kind to people. And I think you can't go wrong with that. And also service. Get out of your own head. The best way to get out of your head is doing service. I now, for the last 6 years. I'm starting my 6th year. I was invited. One of my clients runs a J.K. Living Foundation. It's a foundation run by Matthew McConaughey and Camilla Alves, his wife. And so I'm segueing. Is that okay?
Yeah, please. Okay. No, you gave. I mean, I think. Well, let's just wrap up what you had just said before we jump into that. Just as far as ways to help them move forward in their life. So, number one, your meditation. Really, anything to increase self-awareness, watching those thoughts, being aware to detach from those thoughts because those thoughts aren't you. And then now service. Okay, so service.
Oh my goodness. So,
we aren't all able to serve Matthew McConaughey and Camilla.
That's exactly. But this foundation was created by them, and my client Shannon Rotenberg runs it. And so they invited me in to teach yoga to inner city schools. And so I've been doing that, and I've never done that before. I'm teaching, corporations. I'm teaching privates. This was just so different, so beautiful. So I travel and go to Animo Inglewood, some other schools. They have 6 schools in Los Angeles, 32 schools in the country. There's a wonderful foundation after school for inner city children, and they get to do Zumba class. They get their yoga. They do Siva, which is service. They go in and they clean the beaches. They go to a Matthew McConaughey movie premiere or a Reese Witherspoon movie premiere. Reese is another client of mine now for 14 years.
Jealous. Reese, we're going to tweet you too.
Don't be jealous, but she's a goddess.
We're going to tweet you. I went to Vanderbilt Love Nashville. Reese, y'all. I'm a y'all girl. So yeah, we're so going to tweet that.
Yes. And so, it's like these children who, family of 4, $24,000 a year or less, which poverty level, they get to have these adventures, and they take advantage of these adventures. And I drive around Inglewood and there's not one yoga studio. I drive in Brentwood, there's 40 yoga studios. They don't get these opportunities. So going into the schools and teaching yoga, I've been doing that for 6 years, and you go in and there's a lot of chatter. There's 30 students, and they, within a minute or two, the room is silent. They are harnessing their prana. They are moving their bodies. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And so they've also now asked me to come in and talk story. So as we say in Hawaii, talk story. So tell my story. I keep it to 18, 20 minutes. So we do 20 minutes of yoga. We do 20 minutes of story. And then the questions that follow are profound. And these are wonderful children, and I just love this program. So
talk about coming full circle when you talk about where you started, which was definitely not the 1%, going to 1%, and then full circle back to, and that I think is what keeps you grounded and balanced. Being able to keep your foot really in both worlds.
Right. My goal is to be balanced. My goal is to remove anything from my life that is conflict. I mean, you can't avoid some of it. But I've created this beautiful life, what I call, again,
abundant
life. Again, it could morph into something, and I know that down the road, whatever happens, something could happen, and I know that. But in this moment, it is, a beautiful life and a life of abundance, and that means service, and, it means getting out of your head, because I often see people, I don't have children, and I have a tendency to just be self-absorbed, and I'm aware of that, and, you have to get out of your head, and you have to do things for other people. And
I love that, and I love that perspective in that abundance is anything, really, but abundance, most of all, is, like you said, having this peace internally and this sense of balance, and it's not about a material, because that can go in an instant. It can, even our health can go in an instant, but if we are in a really good, healthy, whole space internally, that's the ultimate abundance. And giving back, service available to all of us, that's abundance.
Right. Just, and also to these children who, they don't have opportunities. So when they see an opportunity, they are all over.
They're hungry for it.
Yes. And so I've just been privileged for that.
You absolutely a wonderful privileged life. So tell me, I'm 50. I'm turning 58. What, this week? You are there. You beat me here. But let's say we're counting down to 60. As my friend Loretta Sayers recently turned 60, and she was counting down to 60. what has midlife taught you? What has, really getting to this sort of pivot point in, reinvention, second act, third act, fourth act, what is the Phoenix rising? All these amazing things that happen as a midlife woman. What does midlife mean to you, and what has it taught you about you?
Resilience, resiliency, how resilient I am, and how clear I am. I have tremendous clarity in what I want to achieve. I've never been a goal setter, and maybe that's a miss of me. I always had coaches that set my goals for me and achieving them, but I was never a goal setter. Tremendous fear of failure, so I wouldn't try things. That's something we didn't get into, but there's been a lot of that in my life, great ideas, but fear of failure, probably,
I think that's a pretty common one. That's a universal fear.
And also understanding that fear of failure is actually not doing it. Not even starting.
Well, you can't, you can't fail if you don't try.
Right, exactly. So just, and not putting so much pressure on myself. I mean, there are times where I feel I don't have much time on this planet and I have to get it in, and that creates a lot of anxiety. And it's like, just, just keep doing a little bit every day towards your goals, a little bit, like I've started to set goals, like a little bit, just every day showing up and do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And then hopefully something's going to land. And in the meantime, I feel pretty good where I am and just really accepting where I am. And I always say, if this is the best it gets, can I live with this? And the answer is yes. If I don't become a famous inspirational speaker, if I can't take this on the road, if I don't, then if this is the best it gets, can I live with this? And I've created this life where I can live with this.
Sounds like the ultimate acceptance.
Yeah.
And what's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself? What's something you really didn't know about yourself that now you've discovered? And you're like, wow, this is really cool.
That I love talking to people. I was, as a little girl, I had such bad self-esteem that I would sit behind people in class and hide so no one would pick on me, because I would start to talk. The teacher would pick on me. You can only get away with that for so long. And my voice would crack. And I literally found my voice, my literal voice. And I was terrified. So I've cultivated a life of being a good listener. And I love listening to people's stories. And, but in the last several years, I love speaking. I love sharing this story. It is a valuable story to share. And I want it to be impactful to people, because there have been several students that have come up to me afterwards and said, this is going on in my house. And I know that they're looking at somebody who normally they wouldn't think. They're looking at a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman who looks like she is of means, that they go, oh, she's a great life. How has her life had anything to do with my life? And I want them to know that that is irrelevant. We all are in this together. And I want to share with them my journey and my suffering that I've turned into strength. And
so that's really important, obviously. Number one, I do believe, clearly I found my voice at midlife, and through a lot of, trauma and having to do a lot of inner work. I think that's, again, a very common one. Many women out there right now may be at a point of feeling this desire, but not knowing how to get there. And the only way to get there is to get there, right? The only way to start speaking is to start speaking and opening up in whatever way. And if we don't tell those stories, we can't change those lives. Nobody can see themselves in us, through us. We can't see ourselves in others if they're not sharing their stories. So be vulnerable.
And you know what? Be vulnerable. Be vulnerable is strength.
Vulnerability is the ultimate strength and courage.
Vulnerability is strength. Being strong and solid. And I tell the boys that. It's like, and get your story out there. Get your fears out there, especially for young men. It's like these men are just, conditioned to be tough, be strong. That's not strong. We know that. Being strong, tap into your feminine side. Women, tap into your masculine side, your Ida and your Pingala. Our masculine, find that balance, that beautiful balance of both, and be vulnerable. Being vulnerable is healing. Being vulnerable is letting people in and see you, and you see yourself for who you are. It's not collapsing and, and weak is just holding everything in and thinking you're going to get through this without a community.
It's so true. I read something recently, Dr. Joe Dispenza, I don't know if you know, I love him, his work. He said a wisdom, which I believe when we get to this point in life, we are filled with wisdom. And wisdom really, he said, is a memory without the emotional charge. So it's having that trauma, having all these things happen to us, but we've been able to work it through and we can talk about it. Yes, there's emotion. That doesn't mean, but it's from a very different space, like you said, a more detached space where those lessons then become the wisdom that we can share with others.
Yes. And letting go.
And letting go. Because we don't.
My mother left this planet,
you have no choice but to let go.
She let go. I went right back into my life. Every month, I pull my car over on the freeway and lose it and allow myself that. But I've also let go of any little annoying thing. You know what I mean?
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Well, that's, and it's like, but really do that. Like, what's important?
Practice.
What's important to you? What's important to me? What's important to me is just being kind, being around kind people and elevating each other. Let's elevate each other. We are all
That's what we do in Forever Fierce. That's our whole mantra.
That's why I'm here.
A mantra.
That's why I'm so grateful to be here.
That's what we do. Yeah. I mean, I do believe, this Forever Fierce revolution that's going on, which is, is so obviously dear to my heart. It is my heart. It's women lifting women. It's not just shifting a paradigm around ageism and seeing us in this whole new, vibrant, empowered way. It's the way, it's a culture of the way women treat women, and that starts within. We have to be kind to ourselves and be kind to somebody else.
And it's that thing where we knock people, you know what I mean? Like, I see that. I know families that are like that. And that actually is...
It doesn't work.
The most self-harm you can do. It's the most self-harm you can do by knocking somebody. It's like, don't say anything. Don't get out of judging people.
Well, because it's coming from you for the most part. Yes. I mean, when we're triggered by someone else, generally that is because there's a wound inside that's been opened. So it's really the more self-aware we are, the more we're going to be kind and compassionate with ourselves, and the more we can be kind and compassionate with others.
Yeah.
So this was just absolutely wonderful. So if people want to, meet you, Kirshen, go to one of your yoga classes, work with you. I know you do some events, retreats. How do they find you?
They can find me on kirshenyoga.com. and kirshenyoga.com, and then Kirshen Yoga on Instagram.
And we will, of course, link all of this.
I'm recently on Instagram.
There you are, recently.
I'm a secret. I'm the best kept secret.
And not for long, hopefully.
Hopefully. But anyway, so you can find me there. And sure, I love this. I'm so appreciative. Thank you for having me. Let's do it.
So with that, thank you so much for being here. This was absolutely pure delight today.
Thank you.
And to my beauties out there, Forever Fierce Revolution, if you guys haven't joined the revolution, please do. There is an evolution revolution over on Facebook, Forever Fierce Revolution. And, some of those amazing things for yourself that Kirshen shared today. I mean, there's nothing better than meditation, self-awareness, being aware of our, thoughts, and getting out there and serving. And maybe look up Matthew McConaughey and Camilla doing some pretty cool things. So with that, cheers, beauties. Stay fierce.